I'm covering completing the end of the book, Genesis 45 through 50. Genesis 45 through 50. I thought I would mention real quickly chapter 44. We can turn to there. We're not going to go read the verses, but at least I can give you three main concepts of chapter 44. Because we begin chapter 45 with Joseph finally reveals himself to his brothers. But in chapter 44, verses 1 through 5, Joseph sends his brothers away. Under the auspices, he's sending them back to his father. But what he does, he has a trick. If you remember from last week, he has a plan. He figures if he sends them away, he planted a silver cup. By planting them, he snuck it in there. He snuck it in there where no one knew where it was, so that it was not something they should be taken from the area. So this silver cup's in there, and he sends them away, excuse me, and then he sends a steward after them, and of course the steward's going to catch up to them, and when the steward catches up to them, he tells them, we're missing something, we got to check you all out, we got to search you all, and then they know the cup's there, and the cup's actually in Benjamin's sack. They find the cup, and so that was all the ruse of how he was going to keep track on them. Well, anyway, they bring the brothers back to Joseph's house. This is all happening in chapter 44. So the brothers come back to Joseph's house. So that's the setup then when we read chapter 45, beginning verse 1. After the brothers come back, they were tricked into coming back. Chapter 45, verse 1. Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him. And he cried out, "Make everyone go out from me. I want all of you, the servants to leave. I want you to go." So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. He looked different. His face looked different, probably the way he was wearing his hair and beard and things. And of course, he had gotten a little older, and the clothes he was wearing, was that of a ruler. But they did not recognize him. Remember, he recognized them when they came to buy grain, but they did not recognize Joseph. So verse 2, he wept aloud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard it. Even though he kicked them out of the room, they knew something was going on. I'm sure they worried about it. Like, what's wrong with him? Maybe they worried he was under attack or something. They could hear him weeping. Verse 3, then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Does my father still live?" They're in somewhat of a shock here. This is Joseph. And he says to them, verse 3, it says, "But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence." Uh-oh, this is Joseph. This is the brother we threw in the pit. This is the brother who we sold into slavery. Uh-oh, how angry is he? How much revenge is on his mind? And so he's asking about our dad, and I'm not sure what to say. Do you, brother, do you think you know what to say? We better walk carefully here, because this could be very, very bad. Revenge, it can be a bitter pill to swallow. We need to be very, very careful. Verse 4, and Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come near me." Well, they came near, but I'm sure they were worried about how, are we going to be in position, you're going to punch me or hit me with a stick? Why do you want me to come near you? Please come near me. So they came near, and then he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery." Well, if he had stopped right there, that really would have made them worried. But he was giving the history of how it actually unfolded. But it's like, yeah, don't tell us about that being sold into slavery. We were hoping you're forgetting. He's not forgetting it. Brothers, he's not forgetting it. He's mentioning it. But he continues on and says, "But now do not therefore be grieved or be angry with yourselves." You could be afraid. You could be regretting what you've done. They could be lashing out, but that doesn't seem to be the wording here. It doesn't like they're attacking him. It seems like they're more afraid of what are you going to do to us, because you're very powerful. We're in your country with your Pharaoh, your land, your responsibility. So again, I think they were walking on eggshells here. But he says, do not be grieved. Don't be angry with yourselves. because you sold me here. Okay, why not? Why shouldn't we be angry with ourselves? Well, Joseph says, for God sent me before you to preserve life. You know, when we talked about any part of the Bible, we're looking for the lessons. And with the way the world is right now and the way trouble is around the world, we look for positive messages from the Bible. And I find this to be a very positive message. We talk oftentimes about people suffering, people going through really tough times, and we need to learn how to deal with suffering. We'd like to live in a life where we don't suffer, and we like to live in a life where we don't have trials, but that's not always the case. And not only can we have personal trials, right now we're having national and international trials. It is pretty rough. It's been this rough before, but you know, it's building again. You know, I did not live through World War II, but I remember my stepfather, when he was alive, he would always tell me, in fact, he would always talk about, this was his take on it, as he was in the military. His take on it was, you know, our nation talks about battles we have, but our nation doesn't know how to sacrifice, he would say. He said, I remember the days during World War II, he talked about how you'd have to turn your lights out at night. And if you had your lights on, if the police came by with your lights on, you could be arrested. Or they would actually come up and bust your lights. And you talk about that. Of course, he was also in Europe fighting. When he was in Europe fighting, he was I don't remember what weapon he had, but he was carrying one of the weapons. And so they were around protecting him because he would have been a target for the enemy to shoot him. Now, he said he was down in Czechoslovakia at the time. He said, and the reports when he was in Czechoslovakia was that at the time Russia was going to use some nukes, and that was the talk. How close it was, I have no idea. I mean, sometimes it's probably been close, we didn't know about it, and other times it's been talked like it's close, and it really wasn't. You know, you can't tell by the reports. But he would talk about the suffering that goes on. He would talk about what it's like in a war. And he would kind of almost shake his head like, you know, these politicians talk about how bad it is, but we don't ration, we don't do any of these things. And of course they don't ration us, you know. And now we're feeling the pinch because of inflation. We're feeling the pinch now, but many times when there have been wars going on, it hasn't affected us. People don't even care. They watch football, they watch Dancing with the Stars, and they don't even care. And so my stepfather would always talk about that. We would just know it was coming, and we'd listen, and he made a good point. You know, a lot of us didn't know what it was like. So again, you know, when you worry about things, you know, the world is really going crazy right now. And so a lot of times when you look to see the promises that were made, that can be very encouraging. So he said, you know, he said, you tried to hurt me by selling me, but God wanted me here. Now, I suppose that when we make the statement that God's involved in everything, every detail, a lot of times we're right, and maybe sometimes we're wrong. But he was right on this one. And so thereby, hopefully, if you're going through something, we don't want it to be because of our own stupidity. We don't want it to be because of our own lust. We don't want it to be because of our own mistake. Some things we might be going through may just be prophecy being fulfilled. And so thereby, we want to make sure we're not creating troubles for ourselves and for our family and for anybody. And it could be that God's hand is in something to bring it down or not. But the fact is, we need to stay positive wherever possible. We need to look for God wherever possible. That's the lesson I'm getting from this report right here. Because basically he said, you didn't do it. You did not sell me into slavery. And at that point, they might have gone, whew, I'm glad he's looking at it that way. But he's looking at God's overall hand in it. And by the way, to see God's overall hand, it takes time. And so many times if we say God's hand is in something, we may not be seeing it clearly. But sometimes in hindsight, then we can see it more clearly. But then he's saying that in verse 6, well, he said in verse 5, don't be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. God sent me here to preserve life. Actually, all that happened to me is going to help you live and help your life be better. Of course, that does picture Jesus Christ, who suffered and died for us to live. Then he said, verse 6, these 2 years the famine has been in the land, but there's still 5 more years to go. We still have a long way to get out of this mess, and that we still have that as a country too. As far as things have come down in many ways, we're not out of the woods yet. And I'm not looking for any politician to fix it. I prefer better policies, but we're in a pickle. We just have to be closer to God, and hopefully we see how all things unfold. But we want to do the right thing ourselves and contribute the best way we can. Verse 7, God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. At that point, they're probably saying, well, we're sure glad you're looking at it that way. You could be looking at it with revenge in your heart. You could be looking at it, you're going to put us in prison. You could be executing us. You could be throwing us in a pit. There's a lot of things you could do. But you're looking at it as God's involved in this thing, and thereby good things are happening. And so that's a real nice positive view. If we can have positive views, that's a real good thing to have. Verse 8, so now it was not you who sent me here, but God sent me here. Boy, if I'm one of the brothers, I'm thinking, okay, I'm glad you're looking at it that way. I'm glad you're looking at it that way. Instead of me worrying now, you're actually you're not mad about it. You're not mad at us, and you're finding something positive about this thing. What a wonderful thing. But God has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord over his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. And we have to be honest, when we're in the middle of, or at the beginning of a trial, I should say, we sometimes don't see how it's turning out. So we have to be patient. We have to keep our eyes looking forward and wait for the time we see it unfold. Because sometimes some of the greatest trials in the world, I've used this before, this is small potatoes compared to what's happening in Ukraine and other things. But I made the comment years ago, back when Jimmy Carter was president and the interest rate was 13% for a house. And we were transferred from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Davenport, Iowa. And we found a house. We went out and found a house, 13% interest, and we were happy about it. We were happy about 13% interest. We went back to Pennsylvania to get our stuff, and the bank said, your loan fell through. And of course, I have to admit, I was moaning a little bit. Oh, no, our loan fell through. Well, then we got back to town, and I went into another bank, and I don't know if it was favor from God or favor from this person. I'm happy to give God the credit. And they said, well, I'll tell you what, sir, we'll give you an 8% loan today if you find a house today. And we found a house that day, and we got an 8% interest, which again seemed like 8%, that's horrible today. But when you went from 13 to 8, that was a great blessing at the time. So the point was, the things that look bad, like when we thought, oh no, we lost our loan, and then something better came along. So that's a lot of times, in fact, now some of us are a little conditioned that way. When something bad happens, a lot of us are saying, okay, Father, are you going to open a door for us some way? And we're looking for the open door, which is a good way to look at it. And a lot of times he gives us the open door. But we have to be careful not to be too grumbly when things look like they're not going well, because something good can happen. And that's what, of course, that's the story here. That's definitely the story, what he's talking about here. Well, verse 9, he then tells him, go tell my father what you have seen. Hurry up, go to my father, and tell him what you've seen. And then verses 14 and 15, he has again, he identified himself to his brothers, remember? Verse 14, he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. Moreover, he kissed all of his brothers I assume on the cheek, and he wept over them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. So it was just a family reunion where now people were happy to see each other. Their lives were their mind was put on ease, that they weren't going to get punished by Joseph, and things were looking really good. Now, when Pharaoh finds out about verse 16, the report came to Pharaoh that his family was here, and he's like, well, give them the best of the land. Give them the best. because Pharaoh was really pleased with Joseph's work. And Joseph is a good servant. And Pharaoh was like, this is your family? We're going to take care of your family. We're going to take care of them. Verse 21, they gave them provisions for their journey back to Canaan. They're going to go back to Canaan. Remember, the trick was to not let them go at that moment, but now they're going to send them back. In verse 25, Jacob was thrilled to hear that Joseph was alive. Because remember, verse 25, they went out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan, to Jacob their father. They told him, saying, Joseph is still alive, and he's governor over the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart stood still, because he did not believe them. Are you guys pulling a prank on me? I mean, he's been dead for a long time now. What do you mean he's alive? But when they told him all the words which Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. Then Israel, Jacob, said, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. And so thereby he was willing to travel back to Egypt and to go there. So we come up to chapter 46. Jacob's traveling toward Egypt. So he first of all, God comforts him on the way. I think they're in Beersheba. They're on the way, and God comforts him in a dream. And again, which is really nice when God can comfort. He comforted them directly in dreams many times in biblical accounts. I don't know how God comforts you, but it is really nice when he does comfort me, and really nice when he comforts you. I don't get comforted the exact same style they had in the Bible. Personally, I don't experience those same things like they did, but I do feel God's hand. I do feel God's direction, and I'm looking for it all the time. I'm looking for it all the time. I don't hear voices. I just when I see something that, to me, God's logical. I've made the statement before. To me, when I look at God's instructions, they are logical. To me, there are a couple times it's not logical, to be honest. Like when God told him to Abraham kill his son. That's not logical. When they left Egypt and they were walking a path that didn't make any sense, I could see some of us analyzing. We'd be analyzing and saying, we'd be walking. I'd say, Dixon, what do you think? This path doesn't seem to make any sense. Dwight, what do you think? Dwight, you know the territory. This doesn't seem to make any sense. And it didn't make any sense physically the way they went. But of course, the way it turned out, it made perfect sense in history. So I point out just a few examples where God's way doesn't make sense. I believe most of the time, God's way makes sense. Most of the time, to me, God's way is logical. Now, I'm sure some people would disagree with me on that, but that's my perspective. If God's, sometimes reading the Bible is like, I'm not sure why he did it that way. But in my life, God's way makes sense, because God's way is one of life, it's one of happiness, it's one of serving. And so to me, if I find something that's really strange, I don't automatically assume that's from God. So anyway, here we are, and they traveled to Egypt. Verses 8 through 27, they have various listings of Jacob's sons. Verse 29, Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel. He presented himself to him, and he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. He wept when he saw his brothers. He wept when he saw Benjamin, how he got Benjamin back to see him. And now he got to see his dad, and he wept when he got to see his dad. The verse 31, this is interesting. Then Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh and say to him, my brothers and those of my father's house who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. All the men are shepherds, for their occupation has been to feed livestock. Now there's a phrase, at the very last phrase in verse 34. I find this interesting. It says, every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. So Joseph is looking out for his family. He wants them to fit in their culture, in their way. So their job is to be a shepherd. But Joseph knows the land of Egypt. And Joseph knows the land of Egypt, that the Egyptians did not like shepherds. Okay? So he's giving him advice of how to talk about this. I think it's a good point of wisdom, a good point of getting the facts and using your best way to make the presentation. So back to 31. I will go up and tell Pharaoh and say to him, my brothers and those of my father's house who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. The men are shepherds, for their occupation has been to feed livestock, and they've brought their flocks, their herds, and all that they have. So it shall be when Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? That you say your servant's occupation has been with the livestock from your youth even till now. That you've been a shepherd for a long time. He's trying to point out something positive. Now, I did bring along with me one of my old things, because a lot of times we can look on the internet, but I looked at my old Clark's commentary. What Clark's commentary pointed out why did Adam Clark think that what was the reason why they didn't like the shepherds? He presented 3 reasons. I'm going to show 2 of them. And this is on volume 1, page 256 in Adam Clark's commentary. Like I said, when we were students, we lived by this stuff. When I was a young person, we studied by this stuff. Now we look at our phones. But Adam Clark talks about, he gave 3 reasons why that being a shepherd was not a well-received thing in Egypt. Number 1, he said the shepherds and feeders of cattle were usually a sort of lawless people. They were kind of rednecks. They were not classy people. They were not maybe necessarily calm people. They were not necessarily peaceful people. They were tough. And so thereby, that would seem why he would say, tell them you've been doing this for your whole life. You're not just getting in there a short-term job. This is a full-time job. This is a full-time approach to life. So you can see why I was giving that. But interesting, the third reason, the second one, that's not important to me. The third reason, he says, the last and probably the best reason why the Egyptians abhorred such shepherds as the Israelites was because they sacrificed these animals. And many times the Egyptians would view these animals as, some of them would be sacred. And of course, in the sacrificial system, the Israelites would sacrifice these animals left and right. It was part of what they did, even for the upcoming Passover. So they were sacrificing these things. So again, it was a matter of, again, lifestyle, but it was also a matter of religion. Why that? And interesting enough, we'll continue reading here. What is your occupation? Your servants have been with livestock from our youth even till now. Both we and our fathers. It's a family approach. It's a family business. We're not just fly by night. We do this. And this is why we want to live in the land of Goshen. And that's when it says, for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. Interesting enough, in chapter 47, verse 6, we'll jump ahead just a second. Chapter 47, verse 6, it mentions, in chapter 47, he welcomes them to Goshen. They welcome him to Goshen. Jacob and the sons arrive in Goshen. And verse 5 says, and Pharaoh spoke to Joseph, saying, your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Because remember, he loved Joseph. He loved Joseph's family. So here he was, well receiving them. He says, have your father and brothers dwell in the best of the land. We're not just going to put them up. We're going to have them find the best place to live. Let them dwell in the land of Goshen. And here's the phrase, and if you know any competent men among them, then make them chief herdsmen over my livestock. Some of our guys over the livestock aren't very capable. You are experts. You've been doing this from your youth. And so again, thereby, you do a sacrificial system. You are experts of taking care of these animals. And maybe some of our people are not as dedicated. So again, I'm using that verse 6 there to kind of support what we saw at the very end of that last chapter. Well, as it turned out, chapter still 47, verse 7, Joseph brought in his father Jacob and set him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh, and Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How old are you?" And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage." And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out before Pharaoh. And then verse 11, the family settled in Ramses, which again was the best of the land of Goshen, because he gave him that best part. Verses 13 and 14, Joseph sold the grain that had been stored. Remember, he was there to collect the grain. He was collecting for the famine. And then he sold it, which again, that would be an interesting, for those people who have certain views of religion. I mean, you want to be giving. You certainly want to be giving, for sure. But he did sell it. He did sell it, and I'm just stating the history. They sold the land, verses 15 through 17. The people traded their animals for grain. They traded the animals for grain, so it wasn't just, we're going to give it to you. People can analyze what they think about that. I'm giving you the history. Joseph sold it and said, okay, for grain, give us some of your animals. And they gave the animals, and then even in verses 18 through 21, they traded their freedom for grain. I'm not even sure what I think about that completely. I mean, just I have different thoughts about that. But again, we're looking at this as a history lesson. We can learn things. By the way, we're not at the point of back then the famine, but you do want to. I'm going to give you a little bit of mild prepping advice. You might want to grab a few things that you're going to use to barter. You might want to consider some barter things. Yesterday I was able to buy some coffee, which I gave to some members of the community. I talked to Ron and Linda Avey. I bought some coffee that we're going to, we buy coffee, we serve it on the Sabbath, so I got coffee at a good price. And I gave some coffee to some people who said, yes, I offered them, would you like coffee? They said yes, because coffee will be a good thing to trade in the coming weeks, months, and years. Just for the record, ammunition will be a good thing to trade as well. Alcohol will be a good thing to trade. I'm just telling you, you might say, I don't want to hear about that. Well, I won't talk much more about it then. But there are things you can trade, because back at that time, they traded their animals and then they traded their freedom. So again, are we going to have the exact same thing? I have no idea. But again, I would encourage you to be a mild prepper, not to take the place of salvation, but certainly think, use your head, use your noggin, and if God opens a door, try to find things that could be useful for you down the road. If you prepare for things you might be able to share with others, it's better if you give something to someone rather than they try to steal something from you. So again, just the one that I watched how they did it. He actually sold the grain, and they went into slavery. They sold their freedom. And there was kind of a tax put on it. Verses 23 through 26, there was kind of a tax that Joseph did. So whatever you want to think about Joseph, verse 23, Joseph said to the people, "Indeed, I've bought you in your land this day for Pharaoh. Look, I'll give you seed. I'll give you seed, but here's the deal. When I give you seed, 1/5 will come to Pharaoh." So is that a tax? 1/5 will come. We will give you seed, and when you make your product, you're going to give 1/5 back to Pharaoh. So again, it's good to analyze what happened in this history and any history. And I hope we're as honorable as Joseph was. Joseph was an honorable man, where many of the politicians and many of the leaders today are not honorable at all. Although, again, maybe some of them are more honorable at times than we give them credit for. I guess we just have to wait and see how things play out. Okay, verse 28, Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 years, 147 years old. The last part of verse 47 and verse 29, he said, "Please don't bury me in Egypt. Please don't bury me in Egypt." Chapter 48, Joseph went to see Jacob, and that's when Jacob blessed Ephraim and Manasseh. And I'm not going to go through that story. You can go through that story as well. I'm running out of time. I'm going to finish up tonight. So then we come to chapter 49 when Jacob blesses his sons. And you can look how all 12 tribes are blessed. It's interesting, actually. It would be an interesting study sometime, or interactive study sometime, when certain traits are given about the boys. Back when I was in college, I memorized what the going rate was, or the going identification was of each tribe. One tribe we thought was Switzerland, one tribe was this, one tribe was that. And I'm not even saying anything that was true, but I had to at least memorize it to get a good grade. And I was not opposed to spouting it back to people for a good grade, but I don't remember what it was because I don't. It's not a part of my life what these tribes are. I might find it interesting today to talk to some of my friends in the interactive Bible study what they think who the different tribes are, but it's a secondary interest of mine. But it'd be interesting. Okay, we come to chapter 49, the end. There's some instructions about Jacob's death. Chapter 50, instruction about Jacob's death. And then for chapter 50, in verses 1 through 13, the sons buried Jacob. They buried him just like he wanted to. He didn't want to be buried in Egypt. They took him back to where he was from. Still chapter 50, verse 14. I covered this recently in a Saturday Bible study. I'll just mention it again since we're here. In chapter 50, verse 14, after they buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, and his brothers who went up with him to bury his father. Verse 15, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, perhaps Joseph will hate us and may eventually repay us for the evil which he had done. If you remember, King David, when some people hurt King David and they thought King David was going to get revenge, he actually didn't until later in their life. He actually let them serve in the military. He let them serve the country. And then he said, now we're going to enact revenge. Again, these points of history are very interesting. So they were worried. It's like, okay, he was real good to us. He said he liked us. He said, don't worry about it. But, now that Dad's out of the way, is there going to be revenge now? Verse 16, they sent messengers to Joseph, let's get the taste of let's get the wind, which way the wind blowing. Then finally, verse 18, the brothers went and fell down before him and said, listen, we want to be your servants. We don't want to fight you. You're very powerful. You've been good to us, but we're a little worried about you. We're really worried about what you'll do. And Joseph said, don't be afraid. You think I'm in the place of God? I'm not. Verse 20, which again to me pictures the example of Jesus Christ. He says, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about to this day the saving of many people. And I would caution you, I would instruct you to notice people who are out to hurt you. Recognize it. Don't be a dimwit. Recognize people who are out to hurt you. Now, again, you don't want to handle it in the wrong way. You want your behavior to be right. But you want to recognize people who are maybe gossip about you, are rude to you. Recognize rudeness. Quite frankly, when I recognize rudeness to me, what I try to do is just move on. I try to be civil toward that person and just move on. My thing is, if they want to be that way, that's fine. But I don't want to be subjected to their rudeness for 12 hours or even a half hour. If they're rude to me, I can move on. Just move on. But again, just because people are evil toward you, God might still be involved in it. And God might use it in a way that's very powerful. So again, recognize evil, but then also recognize the good that God's way may be having, how he's working with things. Verse 24, Joseph said to his brothers, I'm dying. God will surely visit you and will bring you out of this land to a land of which he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I've run out of time. I was going to at least, even though this is supposed to just be the book of Genesis, I was going to read a few scriptures in Exodus, but you'll have to do that on your own. A few scriptures in Exodus, how the land of Egypt was filled with the children of Israel. More importantly, you have to remember this thing that a new king arose. A new king who no longer liked Joseph and no longer liked the Israelites. And to that sets up the whole history and the story about the Old Testament history of what these days picture. And I thought I might scratch on a little bit, but I've run out of time. But again, in this discussion about the book of Genesis, there's so many good lessons there. I hope that I've given you information that will encourage your study. I hope I've already encouraged your study since we've done 12 of these lessons. I hope that you've reached out and looked at something and learned something from God and learned something from the Bible. Someone could say, well, Dave, you seem to take a lot of time in trying to talk about what the Bible says. I do. Even in my sermons, I don't usually just take a concept and just talk about it. I usually try to take the Bible and try to talk about the Bible. The others who do it differently probably can be more inspiring. They certainly can do that. I have done the sermons like that. I know how to do sermons like that, but I have been trying to spend a lot of time seeing what the Bible says to learn lessons from it. And so I would encourage you to do that. I would encourage you to find it. So hopefully the book of Genesis is a benefit to you. Sorry I didn't get to the book of Exodus before the holy days. You've been probably studying the book of Exodus anyway. I encourage you to do so. And I look forward to seeing you this Sabbath, those of you online and those in the hall here. Before I give the closing prayer, we're going to have Dixon do another song by Erwin Levine and Russell Brown entitled, If It Wasn't For You. Thank you, Dixon, if you bow your heads. Our loving Father in heaven, Father, thank you so much for these days we live in, especially you being a part of our lives. Living these days would not be enjoyable at all. They would be scary in some ways. We would try to tough it out with physical human reasoning. We would try to tough it out with willpower. And those things can be beneficial, but Father, to deal with what's going on around us, we'd like to have your strength and your power. We'd like to have your direction. We'd like to have your open door. We'd like to have the power of your Spirit guiding us, guiding our minds, guiding our emotions, guiding our caring. We want that very, very much. So, Father, we look forward to the Sabbath day when we can rejoice together. We look forward to the feast days coming up to learn the valuable lessons. And we thank you for the hedge you put around us. We thank you for the protection you put around us. Please be with people who are suffering. Please help them maybe get an idea of who you are and what your purpose is in life. Please help people who are confused. Please help people who are hurting. Please help people who are battling demons in this world. Just please help, Father, just make this world be a better place. But we know we look forward to your kingdom, so we ask your dismissal, we ask for your power, and we ask for the ability to have a good day tomorrow to reflect your way of life. We ask your dismissal in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.